Voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Interesting bit of news coming out of Wisconsin. Evidently, in Wisconsin, they have figured it out. The brain trust there in the Republican-led state Senate in the state of Wisconsin, where their motto is forward, have come up with a solution to take us backward again. They have figured out how to solve the labor shortage. They figured it out. No, it's not about increasing wages to draw more people in the jobs. No, it's not about making those jobs better. No, it's not about better working conditions, not better health care benefits. None of those things. It's not about creating good family-sustaining jobs. Not about promoting ability of workers to join and form unions. None of that stuff. No. We're going to take those lazy kids and we're going to put them back to work. We tried the experiment. Some kids are just spoiled for work, getting a little too much education. See, that's a problem in this country. Got too many people who got themselves some education. Now they don't want to work. So what we do is we catch them early, make sure they don't get too smarty pants, and they get used to working hard, long hours, early. That's the key. Again, you go back to the past when they were fighting against labor law reform that would have taken children out of mines. It was one of the things that the wealth class of this country was saying. If you give people too much education, they'll be spoiled for work. They'll think they're better than working. So we can't put kids into schools. Got to keep them in the mines. Well, what the Senate in Wisconsin has done, they've passed a piece of legislation that, like I said, has figured out how to solve the quote-unquote labor shortage, especially for small businesses. This is about putting those lazy kids back to work. Because last week, the state Senate there in Wisconsin approved a bill that will allow 14 and 15-year-olds to work until 11 p.m. Yep, that's what they're doing. Currently, Wisconsin, like many states, like all states across the country, they abide by the federal child labor laws that are in the Fair Labor Standards Act that allow children under 16 years of age to work from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. from June 1st to Labor Day. What they're considering the summer months, when you don't have to get up the next morning and go to school. So they're saying, you know what? We're going to let 14 and 15-year-olds wake up at 7 o'clock, go do some work, and maybe they can work up until 9. Maybe. I think that's a bit much, but okay. During the school year, it's changed. It's 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. because you want the kids to get a good night's sleep. They're younger. They need a little bit more sleep. That seems reasonable. But no, not in Wisconsin. No, in Wisconsin, what they want to do, what this legislation will do, is it will allow the kids to wake up and on school days, get up at 6 a.m., get to work early, get a couple hours in before work, and then, after school, maybe they can work all the way till 9:30. When school isn't the next day, 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. Now, their belief is this is how they're going to fund tourism and all of the small businesses. Because, in their, bless their hearts, they did put a cap. You can't make companies making over $500,000. We can't let, the big corporations exploit children, just the little ones. Now, the bill would keep into place that these kids can only work 3 hours a day. And at least they've left that for now. 8 hours on school days for now. And 6 days a week. So 6 days a week, 3 hours a day. That's what they've come up with. The hotel and tourism people are all tingly in the panties. Happy, thrilled. In fact, the Restaurant Association, very happy about it, except don't like some of the onerous regulations that come along with it. You can't have them using dangerous machines or running credit cards or things like that. Kind of young age, not a good thing. They're not thrilled. They want those kids, we need to put them to work. Obviously, the AFL-CIO in Wisconsin opposed to it. as am I. Now, look, I was somebody who, as a kid, I'm not against kids working. In fact, I wish we would bring some of those kid jobs back, like paper routes. Paper routes used to be for children. Yeah. Yep. You had the paper boys in the corner. That's what they used to do. When I was 8 years old, I got my first paper route. I was delivering the Cleveland Press. It was an evening newspaper. I'd come home after school. I'd get my papers together. I'd go out. I'd deliver them after dinner. Made a couple of bucks. At 9 years old, I then got a Cleveland plain dealer route. Got up a little bit early before school, went and delivered my newspapers, came home, did my homework, had dinner, went out and delivered the evening press. Not against that. Those are kid kind of jobs. But when you start talking about taking jobs that, well, adults should be doing, I got a problem with that. Because all you're really talking about doing is, hey, how can we lessen the working conditions? How can we exploit a workforce? And I'm against this. I'm against this in a pretty big way. But, I think the trend is going to go that way. You see other states like Oregon, for instance, evidently lets 14-year-olds work at McDonald's. And there are other places around the country that do as well. Am I against kids working? No, I do have a problem with the times. This is what they're supposed to be doing at this age, is getting a good education, the best education they can. Maybe learning a little responsibility, a little work ethic. Good at that. I'm happy with that. But this a bit too far. And the reality is, this is just an opportune moment for them to roll back some of the New Deal era protections that kept kids out of the workforce. I tell my kids all the time, you got one chance to get an education. You got one opportunity to be in this moment and to take advantage of this opportunity. Get the best education you can. Yeah, work a little bit, save a little bit of money, do that stuff, understand what the job place is about. But this isn't your full-time existence, nor should it be. So going to be interesting to see how this plays out in Wisconsin, because if Wisconsin, whose motto is forward, ends up going backwards, how many other states are going to follow? I reached out to my state representative friend here in Pennsylvania, said, hey, anything like this on your docket? Not yet, is the response I got. So not yet. It is what it is. Now understand, we're blaming the workers for this. We blame the workers, their fault. They're too lazy to work, or they won't work for the poverty wages. And understand, we do that in every vein. Everything we do, it's about blaming the workers. Look at what we're doing in education. We don't have enough teachers. We don't have enough support staff. So blame them. Don't blame the conditions. Don't blame the idiocy of our policies to keep these workers safe. Because understand, most of the bus drivers that I know are retired women who, it's a part-time job. It's always been that. And you've created an environment where you're not really doing everything you can do to keep those workplaces safe. I'll tell you, if I'm doing this as a part-time gig, need a little extra, what my grandmother used to call pin money, I'm not doing it. Not doing it. It's, again, a failure of leadership and policy. It's not to blame the workers. Now, over the weekend, saw Jack Dorsey, the CEO of Twitter, come out and claim and throw his hat into the ring that he believes hyperinflation is around the corner. And as I'm reading this story about Jack Dorsey, saying, hyperinflation is around the corner, because we know when hyperinflation comes, it's usually wartime, it's usually when a shock to the system happens, or you've got this massive supply chain gum up, like we have right now. We've got really an unequal manufacturing world, where most of the manufacturing that's done in this world is done in China and Asia. And the finished products are stuck on ships waiting to get in. So we're blaming truck drivers because there aren't enough of them. They're lazy. They don't want to work. So instead of, this is beautiful. So instead of saying, how do we make the conditions better for truck drivers who will want to come into the trucking industry and not continue to have an industry where people live in their trucks like animals, basically sweatshops on wheels. How do we make the job enticing to want to draw people to it? Not what we're doing. What they're doing, here's the push. They're trying to get the age to get a CDL lowered from 21 down to 18. Now, let me ask you, think about your 18-year-old self. You really want an 18-year-old behind an 18-wheeler hauling 80,000 pounds down the road and telling them you can make as much money as you can while the wheels are turning? So as fast as you get to where you're going, you're going to make more money. Do you really want that scenario on your highway? The answer is no. At least I don't think it is. But. This is the direction that the trucking industry, the brain trusts, and the associations are pushing for. Got to lower that onerous age. You know, if you can join the military, you can drive a truck. And look, you know, there's a lot of argument. Say maybe it's 21 for a reason at this point. A lot of places that I remember wouldn't let you drive to or 23, and then you had to have, you know, years of experience. Now it's throw all of the safeguards and all of the rails off and barrel down the highway. Again, putting the responsibility onto those least able to shoulder it. And again, not doing the things that you need to do to make things better. So the argument is, well, we can't, you know, the supply chain's gummed up, so hyperinflation is coming. And this is what Jack Dorsey is saying. Now, as I'm reading through this, I'm thinking, okay, Jack, let me get this straight. You see hyperinflation coming. And now understand, I don't think inflation is a bad thing. I think a little bit of inflation, not too bad. Especially if wages keep up with the rate of inflation and you end up making a little bit more than the cost of goods rising, especially if you've got stronger unions to demand better wages, hours, and conditions. I think it's a good thing. You know, I go back to my grandparents who lived through the stagflation of the 70s, which made their mortgage payment that they took out in the 60s a joke. In fact, by the end of the 70s, the mortgage payment that my grandparents took out in the 60s was literally 1 day pay. 1 day's worth of pay was their monthly mortgage. So it helps debtors, and this is always the position. Depends on where you are and how inflation's going to affect you. If you're deep in debt, inflation's probably going to do pretty well for you, because you took out money at a certain rate and a certain amount, and your wages are going to go up and you're going to pay that debt off faster. If you're someone who has a lot of money and you're holding on to it, inflation probably not going to be your best friend, because you're not going to get, and as a country that is a debtor country, a little inflation might be a good thing, which is why I've been arguing that this obsession with holding inflation down, especially wage inflation, has really harmed the working class of this country. But we'll see if Jack's right. We'll see if hyperinflation is coming, not just for the U.S. He claims across the world this is coming. Now, the reason I bring this up is immediately my mind goes to everything that happens in this country gets blamed on working people. Everything that happens gets blamed on those who have the least power to deal with the situation. It's always, remember the housing crisis? It was all those people who took out mortgages they couldn't afford. It was the people's fault. It's the workers' fault. It wasn't the banks who changed their philosophy of, hey, can they afford to buy this house and have 20% down and be able, will we set them up for success? Or when they changed to, hey, you know, in 5 years, when we repossess it from them, we'll have gotten all of our interest up front, and then we get to sell it again to some other sucker who's going to pay us 5 more years of interest. It's a win-win-win. Except what happened is a whole bunch of people couldn't afford it, and the whole thing collapsed because greed took over. But it was still those people's fault. I see this happening if Jack is right. If we do hit an era, a period of high inflation, I can see it coming. And mark it on your calendar that I said it today. This is going to turn around and be blamed on all of the striking workers who are demanding better wages, hours, and conditions. This is going to be put on all the people who marched out of jobs and said, no, we're not working in this service industry for crummy wages. We're not working without health security or retirement security. We demand better for ourselves and for our fellow workers. I guarantee you that the message would be, well, see, they got what they wanted. They wanted higher wages, and they got higher wages. And it ends up costing you, the consumer, ends up costing you more. I can see this coming. As clear as day. Because this is their MO. Now understand, higher wages will will raise prices a little bit. But understand, for the last 45 years, the wealth class of this country has gotten away scot-free. They have lined their pockets enormously off the backs of working people. You've got 45 years of raises that didn't get into people's pockets, now being demanded. People saying, look, we've worked for stagnant wages for way too long. We've worked for starvation wages way too long. Now is the time that you reward our work. You called us heroes and essential and all of those things during the pandemic, and now we demand to be treated as such. So, I'm looking into my imaginary crystal ball, and I'm going, if this happens, if we get inflation, it's all going to be blamed on the workers who are striking right now and those greedy unions. Because what the messengers at the top understand is it's so easy to divide the working class and to blame each other. Because we see each other. I saw a guy the other day. The guy has a sweater on that says, I work like crazy so the lazy can stay home. And I had to ask, I go, which lazy are you talking about? Are you talking about the 745 billionaires who pocketed an additional $2.1 trillion during the pandemic? Well, no. Huh? How do you not think that you're supporting them? Because he doesn't see them. What he sees is the person who's struggling to get by, who has to use the EBT card at the supermarket. What he sees are people who are struggling to get by because the jobs that they're able to get are poverty wage jobs. So it's easy to point at them. And he's also pointed at them by every right-wing media outlet on this planet, because it really is about dividing and conquering the working class. So when it comes to it, when we get to this moment, if we get some high inflation, who's going to be the blame. It's going to be those evil workers who had the audacity to think that they should be treated to reasonable wages, reasonable health care benefits, reasonable retirement security, and dignity. But that's just my thought. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe corporate America will say, no, our bad. We did this. Our greed and our obsession with more caused this crisis. Which side do you think is actually going to happen? Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back. Stick around. Still listening to The Rick Smith Show.
More American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1886. That was the day Henry George accepted the nomination to run for mayor of New York on the United Labor Party ticket. In cities across the country, trade unionists met to found state labor parties and to hammer out political platforms for local and state elections. In New York City, ULP advocates issued the Clarendon Hall platform and nominated Henry George as the ULP candidate for the mayoral race. George had gained prominence with the 1879 publishing of his book, Progress and Poverty. In it, he addressed private land ownership as the basis for inequality and advocated for a single tax system. At New York's Cooper Union that evening, where thousands of supporters gathered, George addressed the crowd. He presented the ULP platform of higher wages, shorter hours, better working conditions, government ownership of railroads and communications, and the end to police repression. Burroughs and Wallace described the scene that night in their book, Gotham, A History of New York City, to 1898. During his speech, George declared, quote, "This government of New York City, our whole political system is rotten to the core." He argued that politicians had made a trade out of assembling votes and selling them to powerful interests. What business got in return was police protection, lax enforcement of housing and health codes, friendly judges, and fat franchises. To purify the political order, working class voters had to sever ties to all the established parties and choose from their own ranks. For a party that had just been founded weeks before, George came in second. But like its sister organization in Chicago, the New York ULP would split over issues of socialism within a year. Labor History in 2, brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the month of October has been dubbed Striketober, and like I said last week, I'm hoping that this translates into Never Again November, something else for December, and this kind of energy and militancy continues into the coming months. Because look, we desperately need it. We need the kind of activism we've been seeing. In fact, so many strikes right now. The number that I saw last week, there are more than 100,000 people who are either on strike or have authorized going on strike right now, which in my lifetime, I think that's probably the most I've seen in my lifetime, which, again, a good thing. In fact, this is so big that the AFL-CIO has dedicated a web page to this. It's their big strike map. You can go across the country on this map and find in your backyard where there are strikes going on and where you can help participate. And it's aflcio.org/strike-map. We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at that. But here to share some thoughts on this wave of strikes going on and maybe some details of the big ones, I've asked Dave Jameson to come talk with us. Dave is, in my view, the best labor reporter in the country. He's a labor reporter over at Huffington Post. Dave, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, thanks for having me. Thanks for the kind words.
So, I'm looking at this strike map that the AFL-CIO has put out, and this is a pretty interesting moment. All this activity and in such a short period of time. I'd like to get your thoughts.
Yeah, something's definitely happening here. With the caveat that the big numbers are strike authorizations, right? That doesn't necessarily mean everyone's going out on strike, but say if there were a strike in Hollywood to come to pass, that's 60,000 workers right there. That would be the biggest private sector strike in 14 years. You've got over 30,000 who've authorized a strike at Kaiser, healthcare workers, and of course the 10,000 at John Deere. So the possibility of all these workers being on strike at once those are big numbers when you compare it to recent history. Over the past decade, a typical year in big work stoppages, we might see 150,000 out on strike, in a given year on average. And I think that teacher strikes of 2018 and 2019, have inflated that a bit. So if we had over 100,000 private sector workers on strike at once, that would be a really big deal. But of course, we got to put this in kind of the broader perspective of, the long lens of history here. You go back to post World War II years. We used to have 1 or 2 million workers out on strike in a typical year. So these, in the grand sweep of history, these are not big numbers, and that's a function of union density being way down. You generally don't go out on strike if you don't have a union. It requires a strike fund, organization, everything that unions do. So in the grand sweep of things, these are low numbers, as we've seen for years, but kind of in more recent history, something's popping here, and I think a lot of it has to do with the leverage workers are seeing. There's kind of a weirdly tight labor market in a lot of places. There were very few strikes last year during the pandemic. A lot of bargaining was put off because of the pandemic, and I think now workers are coming out of that, and then they're flexing their muscles a bit.
Yeah, and also, the thing that I keep hearing overwhelmingly from the people who have been going on strike are, all during the pandemic, we were called heroes and essential and patted on the back and say how wonderful we were, and now we're being treated like garbage. And, they kind of got used to being respected. They kind of got used to having a little dignity. And now they're demanding that their pay, their compensation, and their working conditions meet that. And I think this is a great moment. But to your point about, just what we're seeing in the small number of folks who have unions, I think the other side of this is happening as well with the Great Resignation. As you're seeing all these people just going, I don't have the right to strike, but I have the right to leave. And I think that's the reason you're not seeing people coming back to some industries, especially in the low-wage service sector.
Absolutely. I think you're totally right. What we're seeing in the non-union world of high rates of quits, high rates of people staying out of the workforce, millions of people, because for one reason or another, they don't like what employers are offering. So I've called it kind of a silent strike, where this is not workers going out on a picket line and walking off the job. This is workers just saying, you know what, I don't like what you're offering, so I'm not going to work. And I think for the non-union workers doing that, I think it's for a lot of the same reasons as the union workers, at John Deere and elsewhere who have gone out on strike, is they don't like what the employer is offering, so they're holding out for something better.
Yeah, and this to me is one of these moments, Dave, where you go, it's apparent we need major comprehensive labor law reform, because you have so many people quitting instead of saying, no, we're going to stand and we're going to fight and we're going to make things better. Because look, I grew up in a generation where, if something was wrong in the workplace, we believed that we could change it. We believed we could organize. Look, I'm a lot older than what's going on now, but I remember a time where we thought, at least we'd have a fair shot at organizing. I think right now, the majority of workers in this country know that the chances of organizing and winning an election and getting a contract are so much more difficult than they were in years past, which is why, one, I think we need the labor law reform. But two, do you think this is a possibility of a moment where employers finally wake up and go, well, maybe you should make it a little bit easier because we can't get anybody to come into these crummy jobs?
Yeah, I think an interesting thing, is going on here where we have this tight labor market that is giving workers leverage. But as I keep telling people, I think a lot of people in unions and a lot of people on the left are excited about what's going on right now. But this could be really fleeting, at the end of the day. If this is really just a function of what's going on in the job market, that could be a temporary shift of leverage towards workers and not something systemic. This isn't necessarily what we're seeing, something that is going to put more workers into unions and give them the ability to wield the strike weapon, right? I think you'd be looking for some more systemic change with something like the PRO Act or pieces of the PRO Act that end up going into law, that make it easier to join unions, make it a lot easier to win first contracts. That's the kind of potentially permanent shift in power we might see. Short of that, maybe this labor market changes and a lot of that leverage evaporates, and in 5 years we're looking at a total reversal of the tables here. We just don't know. No,
and that's the sad thing, because I keep telling people, I have some friends who are bus drivers, and they say, well, they're throwing better wages, everything's great right now. I go, this is the reason you need a union right now, to make sure you get that in writing, because just what you're saying, in a year, 2, 3, 5, when things go back to the way it used to be or what was normal then, they just claw all that stuff back, and you're no better off. So right now is that time. We're with Dave Jameson. Dave is a labor reporter over at Huffington Post. You can check out the work that he does over at HuffingtonPost.com. Dave, let's talk about some of the work that you've been doing around the John Deere strike, around what's going on with Ayatsi and this tentative agreement. Let's start with John Deere. 10,000 workers out on strike. Tell me what's going on.
So the Deere strike is a really fascinating story for a couple reasons. One being that this isn't just a repudiation of John Deere, it's frankly a repudiation to the United Auto Workers, who bargained a tentative agreement. They took it to membership. They thought it was a satisfactory deal. The Deere workers voted it down overwhelmingly. 90% said no, go back to the table. And that's how we ended up, having this very large strike. And, having talked to workers, they feel like they've really got the short end of the stick on the last few contracts. A big piece of why this rejected was they have a two-tier system at John Deere. This was created in 1997, where new hires thereafter would be getting lesser pay and benefits. They've closed the gap on the pay. The lower benefits are still there. The workers want to eliminate that. Deere wanted not only to keep that system in place, but to essentially expand it, create a third tier for new hires who wouldn't get any defined benefit pension at all. So, the workers I talked to said, we're tired of this kind of them dividing us. We want equal pay for equal work. We don't want to be, siloed into these different classes that resent each other, right? And the workers now know if we sell out the workers who come after us, why would they look out for us, when the time comes in contract talks? And so this is like the two-tier thing. We've been seeing this for years, Rick. You know it, really well. I think it's coming to a head now. We see it at Kellogg's too. The fight there is largely about a two-tier system. Kaiser, same thing. Strike authorization in large part because of a two-tier proposal. I think workers are tired of the divisions, and a lot of them are recognizing that it essentially threatens the union itself over the long term by the way that it sows division. So Deere, what's going on there is interesting because the members have told, both Deere and the UAW, we're tired of the system. We're taking control here and we want to change it.
No, and look, this is, unions are our workplace democracy, and this is what an active membership is all about. Something that I talk about all the time, what I think is important. If you're a member, be an active member, be engaged. When things come this way, vote it down. But here's the thing. I remember those two-tier systems coming out back in the 90s, and people on the job going, screw the unborn. We're gonna get what we get now. And I remember back then saying, you're creating a division within your union, and this is going to rip you apart. And we're right where I think every working person was like, this is a bad idea. Because I talked to a guy from Kellogg, and he said that it's such a big gap between what one group makes and the other. It's like $12 an hour.
It is.
And they can't keep people coming in. Their turnover rate is incredibly high. So what ends up happening is you can't keep people. So the the people who've been there a while, end up getting abused with massive forced overtime and all kinds of things. And this is where we are, which is why you would think that the company would go, hey, maybe we do need to close that system.
Yeah, I think that's right. And the folks at Kellogg's, and we've heard it at, we heard it at Nabisco too. Workers saying that their companies are having a hard time retaining people, and we hear it at John Deere too. I was talking to someone at the Waterloo plant who said that he feels like they're only hanging on to half of the new hires that they've brought on recently, because those folks are getting lesser benefits than people used to, and on top of that you got kind of a tighter labor market where employers don't necessarily have the pick of the litter. They say at Deere, they used to be able to just, interview 100 people and pick whoever they wanted. That is not how it is right now. And so, that at Deere combined with the high ag commodity prices, Deere is extremely profitable. It's a great time to be selling farm equipment. The workers sense that as a couple told me, like, it's now or never.
Yeah.
These are the best conditions we're going to get to go on strike, so let's do it now.
Yeah, no, so where do you see this going in the coming days? I mean, like you said, now is the time Deere should be selling all of the tractors they can. I can't imagine that they're overly happy having their workforce out. This is the time for them to negotiate and end this quickly, because ultimately this is about John Deere ending this strike.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I never place bets on when a strike is going to end, because I feel like I'm always wrong. Yeah. Deere put out a statement yesterday or the day before saying they feel like progress has been made in talks, and this is obviously going to be really painful for them, however long it drags out. And if you're a worker, getting $250 a week or whatever from the strike fund it does not compare with what you normally get. So I think everyone wants to wrap this up, but the workers I've talked to are thinking this could go on a long time. I mean, I talked to one guy who refinanced on his car loan, and is just ready to dig in, and is convinced that Deere is going to come back with essentially the same proposal. So, people there are ready for a fight. And like a lot of strikes, you talk to people who say, I wanted to go on strike 5 years ago. This is something that people have been kind of mentally preparing for a long time. And so I think a lot of people are ready to hold the line for as long as they think they need to.
Yeah, and hopefully they financially prepared. As an old timer told me, day one in a union job, he said, before you get used to spending all the money you're going to make, put 6 months of your bills in a coffee can and forget you have it, because you may have to walk across on that picket line, and you better not be hungry. Because it could go 6 months, it could go longer. So you got to be prepared to fight and defend what we've got here. And he was not wrong. Let's move over to the Ayatsi tentative agreement. Because initially I looked at it and going, well, there's some things I'm not thrilled with, but they got something better than what they were offered. We're now hearing some grumblings from the membership that, no, they're not really interested in this at all. Tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah, it's this is with the caveat that there are no polls on this sort of thing. I don't pretend to know how this ratification vote will go. I have talked to people who have pretty serious concerns about it. People wanted strong turnarounds, right? This is an industry term for the amount of time you're guaranteed between your shift ending and when you have to be back the next day. The union in the tentative agreement got guaranteed 10-hour turnarounds. A lot of members already have that. They wanted something stronger, on the order of 12 hours. And there's also this issue of residuals from streaming content, right? Streaming is blown up. It's the huge part of where the studios make their money. There's traditionally been lower pay and residuals on that stuff. The proposal does pull the wages up, but people are concerned that the residual piece is not being addressed satisfactorily to keep the health and pension funds in good shape. So the residuals are a big piece of this too. And then you had this horrific tragedy where the cinematographer got shot and killed on set the other day in that Alec Baldwin film. And for a lot of people, I think that sort of brings home the safety and workplace and working conditions aspect that they've been talking about here. It's been reported that some of those workers walked off the set that morning before this happened over their pay being held up and them having safety concerns. So there's a lot of variables and a lot of wild cards here, and it's amazing to see so many people really in tune with the process. I mean, I've talked with a lot of workers who are never kind of this closely attuned to what their union was doing. So I think there's again a big kind of democratic moment here of people being really engaged, and that over the long term is going to be a good thing. We'll see if this is bumpy, and what happens with this tentative contract. Maybe it gets approved on strong numbers. Maybe it gets voted down and they send the union back to the table, and then things could get kind of hairy. So we don't know how this is going to go, but this is very far from over.
Yeah, I mean, because like I said, I saw the tentative agreement and I'm like, yeah, they won some things. I would have, in this moment, being the historic nature of the vote to authorize a strike, and the sheer number of people participated, I thought that maybe they got a little bit better, but we'll see. We'll see how this vote plays out. Dave, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff. Keep up the great work there at Huffington Post, and I hope you'll come back and talk to us again real soon.
Always great talking to you, Rick. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, our good friend Dave Jameson. Make sure you check out his work over at Huffington Post, huffingtonpost.com, the website. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1990. That was the day that 8 of the 10 unions at the New York Daily News went out on strike. The paper had one of the highest daily circulations in the United States. The New York Daily News was owned by the Chicago-based Tribune Company. The strike began when management demanded major concessions from the delivery drivers, essentially forcing them out on strike. 7 more unions joined them on the picket line. In retaliation, management brought in scab labor. This caused the 9th union to join the walkout. The newspaper guild workers had planned to honor the picket lines, but not go on strike themselves. But according to an article in the Los Angeles Times, quote, said local guild president Barry Lipton, the editorial employees decided almost immediately at an afternoon meeting to go on strike rather than to work with any imported scabs and goons. Well-known journalist Juan Gonzalez was a strike leader for the local. By using replacement workers, Daily News management was able to keep the paper in production, but they found it much more difficult to get the paper distributed. Even where they could make delivery, many newsstands refused to sell the struck paper. The New York Times blamed this on intimidation from the delivery drivers. But they also acknowledged that some refused distribution either out of sympathy for strikers or an unwillingness to offend pro-union customers. To support the strike, the unions put on a concert headlined by Lou Reed, along with Pete Seeger, Q-Tip from A Tribe Called Quest, and other musicians. The strike lasted for 5 months, prompting the Tribune to sell the paper. Under new management, the strike was finally settled.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I said at the beginning, one of the things that we do in this country, and we do it quite well, is we blame the people least able to do anything about what they're being blamed for. Like I said, I fully expect if inflation happens, we're certainly going to blame the workers who demanded better wages, hours, and conditions. That, you don't need to be a rocket science, a genius, an economist. You don't need to be even halfway bright to figure that one out, because we know it's coming. Same thing with teachers. We keep hearing there's a teacher shortage, there's a shortage of bus drivers and lunch ladies, there's a shortage of all these things. So who do we blame? We blame the lunch lady. We blame the bus driver, we blame the teacher. Not a system that has created this mess. Not a system that we patchwork part-time people into fill different roles. No. We blame the people who are least able to actually have any effect on it. I'm here to share some thoughts on what's going on in our school system. I've asked Sari Beth Rosenburg to come talk with us. Sari Beth is the Senior Education Advisor for Voters of Tomorrow. She's also an educator. Sari, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
So I'm looking at this moment, and you're gonna have to turn your computer down.
Okay.
I'm looking at this moment, and I'm going, the people who are least able to afford the change, the people who are least responsible for it, those are the folks we're blaming.
Absolutely. It's always the case.
So what can we do about it?
Well, I think for one, we need to, I feel like I'm saying this over and over again, we need to pay teachers more.
That was quick.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
That was quick. There it is.
Pay
There's the answer.
More.
We're done.
I was like, can the world hear me? We need to pay teachers more. We need to pay bus drivers more. We need to pay paraprofessionals more, school staff more. I mean, we've been saying this for how many decades, Rick? I mean, for a long, long time, right? Now, the one thing is that I was doing a deep dive into, last year I was talking to a lot of people in the field, and they were predicting that there was going to be a turnover rate of teachers, school staff like we've never seen. And we haven't, the numbers are still in. So there's the Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics. They don't really have enough information and data to let us know if that's happened yet. But looking at places like, Clark County, Nevada, and Austin, Texas, there is a turnover. We see that. But they haven't really been able to figure it out for the whole country. But one of the reasons maybe why not as many teachers left the profession is that we have a very unstable economy right now. And teaching might not pay that well, but it is a state, in states, especially with labor unions, and once you get tenure, your job is protected.
Right.
So that might explain why we're not seeing that turnover rate. But let me tell you, I'm on the front lines here, and teachers are always burnt out because of, we love the job so much we overwork ourselves outside of the job and all the demands in school. But this year, I've never seen the burnout and just the feelings of, just feeling like we can't keep up. So I'm concerned about that.
No, it's the same thing that I fear about nurses.
Yep. Oh, God. Even more so for nurses. They've been dealing with this for over almost 2 years now.
So now that you're back in the classroom, walk me through what your day looks like.
Well, every day. So I'm turn your computer volume on. Okay.
So what does your day look like?
So basically, what's going on is that I essentially, every morning I'm in a New York City public school system. We do a screening. And then we, put your mask on, and your mask's on all day. Now, luckily, all my students, all the students are complying, wearing their masks, the staff's wearing their masks. So my day, I'm teaching during a pandemic, but I feel pretty safe in terms of that. Is there social distancing? Absolutely not. We're in New York City public school, a high school in New York City, overpacked. It's not the fault of the DOE or my principal or anyone. We're serving a lot of kids, and they need us. But so far we've been okay. I think we have a really good vaccination rate. That's promising. But sometimes I forget I'm teaching during a pandemic because you just kind of adapt. That's human nature.
Right.
But I have moments at the end of the day where, let me tell you, teaching through a mask all day, you get really dehydrated. But I'd rather do that than, spread and get COVID.
Yeah, or go back to a system of where you're having to do what you did last year, which nobody was happy with. So I think you're trying to do the best you can given the scenario that you got in front of you.
Yeah, exactly. And so anytime that I'm like, oh, this mask sucks, I'm like, you know what sucks more? Talking to a blank screen of avatars. So, and I will say in terms of the young people that I'm teaching, they're still adjusting, and I see the effects on them. It's that we definitely need. I know there's been a lot of funding to the schools now with Biden's plan, but I will say that I think every school system across the country, if they think that they have enough mental health professionals, they don't. These kids need that just as much as they need to, learn the content they've missed and get the skills back.
Now, let me ask you this as an educator. Are you concerned that over the last year and a half that kids don't catch up, that they end up through their education careers, being a little bit back? Because, I as a parent, I'm concerned because I feel that the kids lost, a good portion of a year. And that there's part of me goes, maybe we should have a stop and go, you know what, we're gonna throw an extra year on here just to get caught up, or are my concerns too outdated?
I was trying to be optimistic this summer, and I was getting really frustrated with everyone calling it the lost year or whatever. Now that I'm back in the classroom, you're not being hyperbolic by suggesting that. And also in terms of their social emotional growth, their socializing skills, knowing how to problem solve in the classroom with other kids. And I will say that one thing that is really on my mind lately is that not only are the kids miss out on in-person learning and those skills you get, just writing down notes and writing essays. These testing companies are very excited to start testing them again. In New York State, we have a Regents exams, and I think they're acting like things are normal, and they're not. And the kids are really stressed out, and want to know what stresses them the most? Standardized tests, and we're throwing that on their plate this year of all years.
That's a great idea. Yeah, if they haven't dealt with enough already, let's browbeat them with a test that does nothing to help them. And this is my problem. We've opted our kids out of all of the standardized tests, all of their years, simply because it doesn't help them. It's only to. And as I explained to them, I'm not against testing. I'm a big fan of testing. We should be testing it every week, so we know what you know, and then next week we pick up and figure out how to get you to know what you don't know. But these tests you take in March, April, you don't get the results to November. Yeah, no.
No, in New York they take them at the end of June, like the last week of school, and they never see their tests, the actual test booklets. They just see the score. So these are program-based assessments. They're not designed to help the kids. I mean, the data is used to track growth and all that stuff. But if it was really for the kids, they'd be giving these tests earlier than June and giving them the test booklets back. Same with College Board. Kids take these don't get me started about that. That's a whole other segment. The kids take the College Board exams, and they don't even see anything. So,
yeah, I mean, I'm not so against the idea of College Boards just to find out where you are, to place you in the right course. Maybe you do need to take a 100-level remedial course to get caught up, because we don't want people set up for failure. But I'm looking at these tests. No. There's nothing with these standardized tests going through K through 12 that I see of any benefit for the student whatsoever.
Yeah, they're ridiculous. In terms of College Board, I'm just saying, in terms of I sometimes wonder if we should just revamp. I mean, for SATs, that's a different discussion. But the kids aren't guaranteed the college credit. if they're taking the College Board classes. A lot of colleges are not even accepting AP exams now. So that's another beast. But I agree, these K through 12 standardized tests, I just don't understand the point of them anymore, especially right now.
I never understood the point of them. But
yeah.
But here we're in this moment, though, Sari, where education is under attack from all directions. You've got these right-wing idiots who are organizing around taking over school boards because they'll be damned if their kid's going to wear a mask because they want to see their beautiful smiles.
The pretty face.
Yeah.
It's depriving us of it.
Have you experienced some of this craziness in your day?
I haven't, because I keep, New York City doesn't have, we have our drawbacks, that's for sure. But in terms of compliance with COVID safety, at least I'm in a school in Midtown Manhattan, the kids are coming from all across the country. And the one thing that warms my heart, and I'm pretty stressed lately, but seeing the fact that all the kids have their masks on, and sometimes they slip because that just happens, you're talking or something. And I've never had a kid get upset when I tell them to pull the mask up. And, kids were used to having snacks in class. They're not doing that anymore. And they're getting vaccinated. So some kids I'm hearing, not necessarily in my school, but across the country, they're trying to sneak the vaccine because their parents won't let them get it. I find that young people are much more compliant, and because they don't want to be home learning again. They want to do everything they can to get back in the classroom and stay safe.
How screwy is that? I mean,
right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. But I guess it's the world that we now live in. It's this weird, bizarre. Everything is hyper political. I mean, I found it amazing as you were listening to some of these people at these school boards talking about vaccines. Like, this is some rare thing that never happens, and yet all of their kids to get into school have had a series of vaccines that they never questioned before. But now this one that's popped up. And look, I don't think that it would be I think it would be different on the other side had Trump won re-election. I think there would be people on the left going, I don't trust the Trump vaccine. I think it would be kind of the same thing, but it's bizarre that we're in this place.
We are. It's funny you say that, because before Trump lost so many times, right? I did a little poll of my friends, are you going to get the vaccine? And I'm not going to lie, I heard some language like, I don't know if I trust it. And I was all in. I'm like, shoot me up as many times as you need to. I want to get back in the classroom. I want to get back to my life. I want to see my family again safely. But I definitely heard the hesitancy. But I still like to think that everyone would have gotten vaccinated if they had to, and they would have been like pulling these hissy fits on planes and trains and not automobiles. They don't have to get vaccinated. They don't have to wear a mask to get in their automobile. But it's crazy, And the young people, I don't see them freaking out. They're not freaking out about learning about racism. They're not freaking out about getting a shot or wearing a mask. And that's because they're somewhat shielded from the talk radio they're listening to, and the Fox News and whatever is getting into their brains about the politics behind the science.
Yeah, they're not on Facebook.
No, right. It's really, I know, right? They are on Instagram and TikTok, but they're not in that algorithm, I guess, yet.
I guess that's the important part. It's yet. They're still talking about, I saw the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Now, look, I've seen some really dumb things on TikTok and some of these different challenges, like eating a spoon of cinnamon, or the one idiot I guess a bunch of them sprayed rubbing alcohol on themselves and set themselves on fire. But this latest one where you're pulling your hair out or popping your skull or whatever the heck it is, it's crazy.
I don't know. Well, there was also I thought you were going to say the one where this went on for like a week only, I think, and I luckily I wasn't the recipient of this, but there was like a slap a teacher challenge or something, and then a week before that, it was like stealing random stuff from the school. I was like, these kids are really forgetting how to be at school. Like, no, you're not. You really want to steal like a random toilet seat cover? It was really bizarre. So
yeah, they're going to hang it above their bed.
Yeah, like I made it back to school. Check it out. Look what I got. My prize. Ridiculous.
Absolutely crazy. So lastly, on this teacher shortage thing and on the educator shortage, are you seeing it? Are you seeing the shortage? And if there is one, what can be done to deal with this? Because look, I know there are a lot of places they've got a shortage of bus drivers, a shortage of cafeteria workers, things like that. Thoughts? on how we address
Well,
that?
okay. So I think one way you address it, like I started off the segment, pay teachers more, pay bus drivers more, pay school staff more. And it seems difficult, but it sounds like it's difficult, but it's actually not. Also, the less we have schools shutting down, where people feel like, I don't know if I can go to work every day. My son's school might shut down, so then I can't go to work. You see a lot of that happening in the job market. That's why some people are opting to stay home and not go back into the workplace full time, because they're concerned that there's going to be school shutdown. So when it's time to vaccinate your kid, wear masks, like support that, even in states where they're trying to penalize you for following COVID safety, so we can keep the schools open and therefore make people who normally used to work at schools feel like they can steadily go back to work. And then another thing is just like increase and just like, I also think that we need to work on, I know we're talking a lot about the social and emotional health of the young people, and that's very important, but I think there needs to be more funding for mental health services for teachers. I know that in some states, teachers' health insurance doesn't necessarily cover enough mental health practitioners in their areas, and I think maybe like push into schools for teachers to have someone to talk to. I'm seeing a lot of people, we have to remember that teachers are people too. They've lost family members. They've had sick family members and friends. And now they're being pushed back into a classroom with like double, triple the work to catch up. And there isn't really a place for them to turn. So if you want to support healthy, safe schools for kids, you need to create healthy and safe environments for teachers. So let's put some funding into that.
Maybe a guidance counselor for teachers.
No, honestly, there's been times where I've spoken to our guidance counselor, talking about what's going on with a student, and then I find myself talking about what's going on with me, because it's not the worst idea. Why not?
Yeah, but here's the problem. I know a lot of school districts don't even have guidance counselors for the students, let alone for the teachers. And again, this comes back to funding and all of the things that have happened over the last 30 years and the attacks on education. And we're in this moment after the pandemic where all of those attacks and all of those, the death of 1,000 paper cuts are finally coming to light, with everything in our society. This pandemic has really highlighted a lot of the fissures and a lot of the strains on all of our systems. And the question is, where are we going to pick up and move from this point forward?
Right, and I'm getting a little nervous now because we the mantra was like, let's not go back to normal. Normal wasn't working.
Normal sucked.
And we are at a
You're right.
Normal sucked. We all hated normal, but we're at a precipice now, Rick. And I really hope that we stay on that track, because
there you go.
I'm getting a little nervous.
Right there, Sari. I appreciate the time as always. Good stuff.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rick.
Our good stuff. Friend Sari Beth Rosenburg. She's a senior education advisor for Voters of Tomorrow. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2.
On this day in labor history, the year was 2002. That was the day that working people of the United States lost one of their greatest champions in Washington. Two-term Minnesota Senator Paul Wellstone died tragically in a plane crash. The crash took place just 11 days before Election Day. Wellstone was running for his third term in office. His wife, daughter, 3 aides, and 2 pilots also died in the crash. Wellstone was known for fighting for those who didn't have a voice in the halls of power: the poor, the workers, the farmers, the seniors. He once famously said, "I'm here to represent the little fellers, not the Rockefellers." The most impactful legislation the senator passed was the Paul Wellstone Mental Health and Addiction Equality Act of 2007. It required insurance providers to treat mental health at the same level that they would provide for physical health care. When he died, the United Electrical, Radio, and Machine Workers of America remembered Wellstone as the strongest voice for America's working families in the United States Senate. AFSCME Local 34 wrote, "He was the best friend that AFSCME
AFSCME had in the U.S. Senate and supported us and the issues that affected working families. At a 10-year commemoration of his death, Minnesota Governor Mark Dayton called Wellstone the conscience of the Senate. In January, the AFL-CIO established the Wellstone Award. The award honors elected leaders who take a strong stand for workers' freedom to come together in unions and who fight for social and economic justice. Wellstone once said, "Politics is not about power. Politics is not about money. Politics is not about winning for the sake of winning. Politics is about the improvement of people's lives." We could sure use more senators like Paul Wellstone today. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Tick, tick, tick. Each sweep of Big Tech's clock enhances corporate power, but his hands also sweep away more of our civil rights. At first, each new surge of artificial intelligence and robotic technologies can seem perfectly benign, even playful. Take Spot, the robotic four-legged doggy that actually has no spots, no endearing puppy eyes, can't bark, has no tail to wag, and is very undoggy. In fact, this electronic critter is rather creepily nightmarish, but it's marketed by cute videos, including one of Spot mixing margaritas. Admit it, that beats training your real dog to bring your slippers to you. But you can't just adopt a Spot at your local animal shelter. Each artificial canine, manufactured by Boston Dynamics, which is owned by Korean auto giant Hyundai Motor Company, sells for about $75,000. So who's buying them? Mainly such big corporate outfits as oil refineries, mining operations, and electric utilities that want an unblinking eye to monitor and record workers, visitors, protesters, and all others who approach their facilities. Just one more layer of our cycloptic surveillance society. But the point at which Spot loses all cuteness and turns into a menacing beast of authoritarianism is when it's turned into a police dog. There's been quite a public backlash, for example, against the Honolulu Police Department for deploying one of their robotic canines in a tent city for homeless people. In addition to outrage at the obvious class bias in sicking Spot on the homeless, the public outcry grew hotter when it was revealed that the police had used federal pandemic relief funds to buy their Spot. Corporate and government officials assure us that this latest tech marvel won't be used to spy on innocent people, be weaponized, or otherwise bite us on the butt. Trust us, they say. This is Jim Hightower saying no. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is brought to you by the Lowdown Happy Hour, live streamed from the Chat and Chew Cafe. Details at hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So this past weekend, all of the crazies were in attendance at the Q Quack Confab at the Ahern Hotel in beautiful Las Vegas, Nevada. That's right, the right-wing loons were out in full, didn't have their costumes on. I was expecting costumes. And the thing is, you could have attended the overpriced gathering of fellow Facebook-polluted keyboard patriots under the banner of "For God and Country, Patriot Double Down," or whatever the hell that was, or the new RNC convention. It was so bad that even Michael Flynn pulled out. But on their website, they had like George Papadopoulos was there, and then mostly special guests who they did not name. Very, very bizarre. But I was looking at the prices, $650 to get in for the weekend. At the lowest level, $1,300, $3,000. You could stream it online for $1,776. Their favorite number. I gotta wonder how many of those people actually paid and how many were just comped. But some fun, some quackery, some kookery, and some interesting things to talk about, which is why I thought the best person to talk about the Q-Kook Confab is a comedian, and that's why I've asked our good friend, comedian Pete Dominick, to come talk with us. Pete is also the host of Stand Up with Pete Dominick that you can find on all of your podcast places. Pete, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, always a pleasure to join you. Thank you for having me. And I was really sorry that I missed the convention this year. I like to try to go and spend as much money as I can to meet nobodies in Vegas at these conventions. And if they'd paid me to join them for the right price, I would have gone out with my QAnon brothers.
There you go.
Sisters.
There you go. No, and look, it was a bunch of people that I've never heard of. Papadopoulos I heard of, but Michael Flynn wasn't there. There was the Cowboy for Trump guy, the founder of Cowboys for Trump. I guess is now just a cowboy, because he kind of threw Trump under the bus by saying, "Look, Trump promised Hillary was going to jail, and the person who ended up going to jail was the Cowboy for Trump guy."
Yeah, so there's a fascinating, I think is a really fascinating way to talk about that, because right-wing radio and media has always done this. They demand that politicians, Republicans, do a thing, and if they don't, they're not Republicans. They're rhinos. They're fake. But the truth is, they can't do certain things. They try, but they can't do them. There's certain things they cannot do, which is why I'll never forget, and I wrote a piece about this for the Daily Beast years ago. Ron Johnson, the horrific conspiracy theorist senator from Wisconsin, was on Mark Levin, who's a powerhouse right-wing media radio show. He was on a show, and Mark Levin was screaming at this far-right senator, "You're not doing it. Why aren't you doing it?" And Ron Johnson said, "We don't have the votes. We can't do it." The difference between radio hosts and actual politicians is one just has to get ratings and sell advertising, or in this case in Vegas convention, sell tickets. Once you're actually in government, you have to govern. And there are some things you actually can't do and some you can. But on radio and media, they just demand, lock Hillary up. Well, they tried, but they didn't have a case.
Right. There was no there.
Well, Comey investigated her twice, and they couldn't make a case.
Right.
That's the bottom line. So it just became a chant, and it was always a lie. It's not unlike, build the wall. He didn't do that either, and Mexico didn't pay for it. You can say things on the stump or on the radio, but once you get elected, you gotta actually govern, and they know they can't do it, and that's the disconnect on the right.
Yeah, and I look at this Cowboy for Trump guy who's now just a cowboy, whining about this. And when I saw this, I go, yeah, there was nothing there to lock Hillary up for, but there was something there to lock you up for. January 6th was not the frat party that disgraced former Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clark Jr. said it was at the little confab, because he thought it was just a frat party. No, it wasn't a big deal. He said, if you want to see an insurrection, we'll show you an insurrection. I'm going, wait a second, is this the battle cry for the next January 6th?
But it's also, I think it's all so phony. Those guys got paid to be at that convention, probably a good amount of money. I get paid to speak at places. I understand how this works, but I just don't understand it. They beat the shit out. Oh, they beat the snot. I didn't say it. I didn't land it. I didn't hit the T. Come on, Rick. I didn't hit the T. They beat the snot out of police officers. They broke into the Capitol. They vandalized the place. It's just so weird to hear them say things like they were tourists or at a frat party when we have eyes. They committed federal crimes, several of them, and Clark knows this. All of the leaders of the party know this, but they're taking the money at the grift. They're promising, that there's going to be another insurrection, another revolution that they're not going to show up for because they're not getting paid. Here's the thing. If they're not getting paid, they're not showing up, right?
Nope, that's it. That's it in a nutshell. This is all about the grift. And look, I look at this whatever you want to call this gathering of kooks. It's about the money, as all these things really are. And it's frustrating. But my problem is there are some true believers. Well down on the IQ scale, there are a bunch of people who are going, yeah, I believe. For instance, this guy who it just came out, in insurrection. And hey, by the way, when you're committing treason, make sure that you broadcast your treason and then point people in the direction to say, hey, look at the treason I just committed. Yeah. But I look at this guy, this Philip James Weisbecker, who evidently outed himself on Facebook when he posted the interview with Glenn Greenwald and Tucker Carlson and said, if you want to know the truth, ask me. Well, that got federal investigators looking at him. And, well, now he's been indicted. And what we find out is this guy believes that Ashley Babbitt never existed. Trump is still president, and a whole bunch of other just craziness.
Yeah. I mean, that's that's where we're at. I mean, this used to be these beliefs were on the fringe for a long time because not everybody had a platform. Not everybody's voice got heard. It's even like, I was talking to a friend of mine in Australia, and he's like, mate, you guys are crazy. You got way too much speech. There's too much speech. Everybody doesn't get to say something, mate. You can't let crazy people in front of a microphone. He's talking about these, Board of Education meetings. Like, they don't have that there. And, I never held that belief. As a stand-up comic, I was always for the most possible speech. But now that everybody has a camera, and a microphone, and a platform, I'm starting to rethink that to some extent because that people believe the stuff that Weisbecker espouses, that Michael Flynn espouses, that Glenn Beck, for years. And they all have huge platforms to be heard, which is why we are in the situation we're in. That did not used to be the case for most of this country's lifetime. You were on the fringe. You were screaming on a sidewalk. And now you can have a YouTube channel with millions of people where you've convinced them the moon is made of cheese, which it might, I don't know. I would like to find out.
I've never been there, so maybe you can get Jeff Bezos to take you to the moon.
Well, I just hope that the next, I'm hearing talk today in the news, actually, NASA's talking about going back to the moon. I just hope they send a black female astronaut and she plants a flag and then takes a knee by it. Talk about outrage.
That would send these people crazy, and who knows what they would do then? Who knows?
They blow up the moon.
They would blow up the moon
to get that flag. Yeah, they would.
But here's the other thing we find out today, and look, it's all fun and games when you're talking about Joe the plumber or John the garbage man or some of these other kooks who showed up on January 6th. But when you start looking at the names of the people in Congress who participated in this. This is serious stuff. Look, I mean, it's one thing that you had a bunch of kooks show up and a bunch of people who were duped into believing that they were saving the country and that Trump was actually, this is the funniest part of all, that Trump was actually going to pardon them and actually going to stand with them. But you got members of Congress who were part of this. And as you got the report out by Rolling Stone that laid out a bunch of these, Gosar, Boebert, Brooks, Cawthorn, Biggs, and Gomert, of which we all knew, but now saying, hey, they were part of all the planning.
Yeah, it'll be real. I interviewed Glenn Kirshner today about this, former federal prosecutor, and, trying to make this case. But I've always been kind of, I don't know, I'd love to know what you think about this, Rick, but I've always thought that January 6th was kind of a riot that got out of control. Like, I didn't see it as a well-planned operation that they were planning to break in and prevent the counting from happening. I've always thought, wow, it happened organically. I'm one of those people, a lot of people have espoused that belief. I'm open to, I want to know what you think about it. But
I'll push back a little bit.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. Most people do. But I want to know, 650 people have been arrested. They should face, the full extent of the law for what they did. But were there organizers, and what are they responsible for, and what's the evidence? This Rolling Stone article has a couple of witnesses that say that more than one congressman or woman apparently promised pardons. If you go in and you do this or you do that, no matter what crime you commit, beat the hell out of cops, go in and take a dump in Nancy Pelosi's office, steal her laptop, and overthrow the election, we will pardon you. You get a blanket pardon. If that actually happened, and there's proof that happened, that would certainly change my mind about the opinion I just espoused. But how did you see January 6th in terms of, the crimes that were committed by organizers?
Yeah, I said from the beginning, I said the morning.
Glenn makes the case that that you can make a legal case, criminal case, that Trump, Giuliani, and others incited a riot by what they said. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer.
I don't disagree with him, but I believe the people who showed up went there believing they were going to stop the counting of the elector votes. They went there with that mindset. I spent a couple of days beforehand reading Parler and all the crazy right-wing sites. Those people who showed up with the zip ties, the people who brought the makings of a gallows, the people who had a well-planned out way of getting into the building. They knew the soft spots. I believe they knew what they were doing. The vast majority of the people, no. They were just dupes who showed up. But I do believe there was an element that was well prepared and well organized and well trained on how to get into that building and how to get to the place where they stopped the certification of that vote. I do believe that.
You make good arguments. To be fair, I have the makings of the gallows in my trunk of my Chevy Volt most days. So
Really?
I'm not so certain that it's such a weird thing to do. Is that weird?
No, I mean, seriously. I mean, you don't show up to a rally with a whole bunch of zip ties for no reason.
Right.
Sorry, I got some in my garage.
I know, and let me push back, play devil's advocate. These guys are such cosplay fake. Some of them are obviously, too many of them, real cops, real or ex-military. But I still see them as these immature, Civil War reenactors on the wrong side, by the way. And I just don't know. I mean, I think they go everywhere with their guns and with their zip ties and with their whatever, their stupid outfits. I feel like they always have that stuff at the ready because they think the revolution could break out at any moment.
No, I don't disagree with you on that, but I do believe some of them, because I was reading like I said, Parler and some of the right-wing garbage going on, and I woke up the morning of January 6th and I asked the question, how much blood will be shed today? How much violence is going to happen in the streets?
Well,
and
you heard on January 5th on his show, Steve Bannon predicting it, my good friend, Steve
Right.
Bannon. And, I think that is going to be that's why they so badly need to question him about what he might have known. And by the way, on the Bannon thing, it's a tough call. And another thing I talked with Kirshner on my show that'll post late tonight tomorrow, which is that what do you do, Rick, when someone wants to be a martyr? He wants to be held in contempt.
Yep.
He wants to be arrested, and he wants to go to prison. That will bring him so much more credibility. And Glenn says that we don't look at it that way. We prosecute crimes. Whether or not it's good for that person's popularity, social media, or the movement itself, is not why we might choose to prosecute someone. So that's the more naked legal point of view. But just to be clear, this is exactly what Steve Bannon wants.
Oh, without question. I said that from the very beginning, because he knows it's going to take a couple of years for this to work its way through the courts, because we don't have if it's you or me being subpoenaed and we don't show up, they drag us into the hearing and slap us down. Right. Someone like Bannon, who can afford the legal fight that is coming, we could drag this out for years. And again, I point back to Eric Holder during the Fast and Furious thing. He was held in contempt, and it took 5 years, 6 years before they finally came to a settlement, and he still didn't testify.
I didn't realize that it took that long with Holder, but yeah, no, I mean, Bannon can definitely afford it. He made a lot of money his entire life, but he also made a lot of money on that wall grift, which he was arrested for. Yeah. And then pardoned. I mean,
but here's my problem. I mean, you've got all these the craziest of the craziest aren't just the people who are shouting on the street corner anymore or wearing the tinfoil hat. They're actually running for Congress. And I look in, AOC's opponent, this crazy Tina Forte or whatever her name is. This woman's a lunatic.
Oh, I don't know about this. I got to look it up.
She's literally a lunatic. And I look at in Ohio, you got a guy running for Senate, this Josh Mandel, who's running around, still spewing the big lie. Everywhere you look, there's crazy and then crazier running on the Republican side of the aisle.
Yeah, it's nuts. It's everywhere. It's in my local community, where at the Board of Education meeting the other night, a woman went up and she was so mad, Rick, that Joe Biden has replaced Columbus with Indigenous Peoples Day, and she went on a rant about Columbus is Italian like me, and he discovered American. And then it was my turn at the mic, and I said, I'm so sorry, but Columbus actually didn't discover America, actually never stepped foot in North America. Actually, Columbus discovered Barbados and thought it was India. Then he killed everybody. So I'm not sure what you're so upset about. But that's, people believe all kinds of stuff now, and that's what we're up against. And it's really hard to be to combat that.
But Pete, she did her research.
Yeah, I do my research. I'm so tired with these people doing their own. It's one thing to research like political things or even constitutional law issues or something, but you don't. I'm sorry, and this goes to liberals. This goes to my neighbors. Everybody you don't get to do research on science. Here's what you get to do: make friends with some scientists and doctors. That's what I've done. I don't do any research. I don't look it up. I don't look at, if you don't know what a randomized controlled trial is or a peer-reviewed study or what NIH stands for, stop Googling stuff. Ask a doctor friend. Ask a scientist. Make friends with them and find out what they're doing with their kids. And then just do that because they love their kids as much as you love yours. Stop doing your own research. You're a mechanic. You're a comedian. You're not a researcher. Enough.
Yeah, no. I ask people who they're doing their own research. I say, well, can I get a reading list? I'd like to see what you view as research. You know, as one of my comedian friends says, you know, sitting on the toilet with your mouth open watching YouTube is not research.
Well, it is. I would push back on that. It depends on what you're watching. But no, listen, I mean, you could even read an abstract of a study and then come away with a different conclusion than the people who conducted the study with. I love marijuana, but I had a long argument with a guy who's like, marijuana cures cancer. I'm like, I love marijuana. It does a lot of things. It doesn't cure cancer. He goes, look at this study. I looked at the study. I contacted the researcher. I go, does this study say what the guy who's telling me says it says? She goes, no, that's not what it is. And he still wasn't convinced.
Yeah.
I found the lady who did the study, and even she was saying, so people will hear whatever they want to hear, see whatever they want to see. But it's stop with doing the research on your own. You can't. You have an associate's degree in humanities, and I'm talking about myself now.
There you go. And that's what you do. Just stop doing your own research. That's the bottom line out of this. Stop doing your own research.
Well,
Pete,
not on science. No. If you want to know about a scientific issue, ask a scientist.
There you go.
If you want to know about truck driving, ask a truck driver. I think we're good. That's how I've always done it. It seemed to be pretty
seems
effective.
to work. Good stuff.
If you want to know what Steve Bannon smells like, ask me. I shared a studio with him for a year, and it's like nothing. He smells like transparent, clear. And one time, I was just messing with him. I walked in, and I held up a mirror. You could not see his reflection.
I don't, but nobody wants to smell Steve Bannon. Nobody. So,
I'm telling you, he smells like nothing because vampires don't have a scent. And then one day I walked into Sirius, Rick, and he was gone. He was gone. He turned into a bat and flew away and ran the Trump campaign.
There you go. Pete, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff. Thanks so much for your time, man.
Love you, buddy. Thanks for having me.
All righty, our good friend Pete Dominick. Make sure you check out his website, standupwithpetedominick.com. We'll get links out on social media. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1886. That was the day Henry George accepted the nomination to run for mayor of New York on the United Labor Party ticket. In cities across the country, trade unionists met to found state labor parties and to hammer out political platforms for local and state elections. In New York City, ULP advocates issued the Clarendon Hall platform and nominated Henry George as the ULP candidate for the mayoral race. George had gained prominence with the 1879 publishing of his book, Progress and Poverty. In it, he addressed private land ownership as the basis for inequality and advocated for a single tax system. At New York's Cooper Union that evening, where thousands of supporters gathered, George addressed the crowd. He presented the ULP platform of higher wages, shorter hours, better working conditions, government ownership of railroads and communications, and the end to police repression. Burroughs and Wallace described the scene that night in their book, Gotham, A History of New York City to 1898. During his speech, George declared, quote, "This government of New York City, our whole political system is rotten to the core." He argued that politicians had made a trade out of assembling votes and selling them to powerful interests. What business got in return was police protection, lax enforcement of housing and health codes, friendly judges, and fat franchises. To purify the political order, working-class voters had to sever ties to all the established parties and choose from their own ranks. For a party that had just been founded weeks before, George came in second. But like its sister organization in Chicago, the New York ULP would split over issues of socialism within a year. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I love Pete Dominick. He always makes me laugh. And the fact that he shared a studio at Sirius with Steve Bannon. I've been in that studio a number of times over the years. Pete was gracious enough to have us come on and talk about the work that we do here. But he always told that story about Bannon that there's nothing there. That he's a dangerous guy. He thought he was a vampire. And look, I look at Bannon as someone who, he wanted to be held in contempt. He wants to be made the martyr, the martyr for the cause of tearing down this country in ways that, conservatives have wanted for a very long time. Understand, this is a guy who's basically a fascist. This is about control of the wealthy and the powerful, and then the rest of us have to just fall in line. The rhetoric that he uses is well, I can't believe people buy it. Is where I'm at. But the fact that he's one of the most powerful guys in this country is scary stuff. It is what it is. Now, some interesting news. I'm guardedly optimistic. As you know about Biden's Build Back Better plan, I've been kind of going, I don't think we're getting much. Over the weekend, there was a little powwow at Biden's house in Delaware. You had Schumer and Manchin show up. There was some talk that came out of it. Maybe Manchin's okay with another tax provision, going to raise taxes on our billionaires. We talked about this the other day. We've got 745 billionaires who have pocketed $2.1 trillion over the last year and a half. Maybe going and getting some of that and clawing it back and using it for public aims is not a bad idea. It seems Manchin might be on board. Problem is, you got the crazy one from Arizona who seems against the idea of raising any taxes whatsoever to pay for the things that we need. So we'll see how that plays out. But on the Manchin front, maybe going to get something. And I'm a little hopeful. And they're also hopeful that this week that could happen. My problem is the longer this drags out, the longer Manchin and Sinema hold this Build Back Better plan up, the less effective it's going to be next year. And what that means is, the Democrats are going to take a beating, and you will see a lot of the good stuff in that Build Back Better plan then rolled back. Because understand, Republicans, they don't care about any of these social programs. None of them whatsoever. They care about none of this. And in fact, this is part of Biden's plan. This plan to get electric vehicles on the road. And understand, corporate America, the capitalism is already down the road on electric vehicles. The story today was announced that Hertz, rent-a-car, they're going to buy 100,000 electric vehicles from Tesla over the next couple of years. I guess by the end of 2022 is what that was. But they're going to buy $100,000 worth of these vehicles, or 100,000 of these vehicles, because one, people want them, and two, it's going to give them a leg up. Now, Ford, GM, Chrysler, all of the other companies, Toyota, all of the other companies, they're behind. They don't have what Tesla has already, because they've been slow to the game. And they've been slow to the game because they thought, for the longest time, they could hold our system up. The lobbying could slow things down, and now they finally realized electric vehicles are the future. Now we got to hurry up and make battery plants and hurry up and build the next generation of electric vehicles. But at the beginning, they're behind. Which is why I do think we need this Build Back Better plan to invest in the new technologies, invest in things that are going to help deal with our climate. And electric vehicles are part of it. Now, there are problems with electric vehicles that I still haven't gotten answers to. Like, what are we going to do with all the batteries? There are some people who tell me, well, there are recycling processes that you can go through to recycle the batteries and the plastic, just like we do with regular batteries. We'll see. I don't know what you're going to do with the large number of them. Because if eventually every car becomes electric, I don't know. But I think we're moving in a direction that could help us get off of the dirty stuff. And I personally am all in favor of that. Now, you got Joe Manchin, who, coal state, all of that. How much is he going to push back on that? Well, we'll see. But the reality is, the longer it takes to get this Build Back Better plan pushed through, the worse off it's going to be for Democrats next year, which is why Republicans are blocking it so much. It's like anything. Once the public gets a taste of what's coming, once things get better for them, be it better roads, better bridges, Granny and Grandpa gets a new set of chompers or whatever. Which oddly enough, you've got Democrats who are against. You got Manchin who's against, which is just bizarre to me. But we'll see. But once these programs get into place and people see that they're working, then maybe you start getting people going, hey, maybe we should expand this stuff. That's the fear, which is why they're against the Biden came down from 12 weeks of paid leave for family leave down to 4, and they're still against that. It's insane. Just insane. Love to hear your thoughts, though. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. We'll take a quick break right back after this. Stick around.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
What this tells us, by 2030, when we need to be cutting production in half, we're going to be more than double.
Fossil fuel production dangerously out of sync with global climate targets, UN warns. Failure to act on climate change imperils millions of lives, new report finds. California expands emergency drought declaration. Plus,
look, climate policy is never easy.
New study finds cutting U.S. emissions is difficult, but still doable.
We'll see all of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
A global shortage of CO2 is having an effect on the supply of carbonated drinks.
A shortage of CO2? Am I the only one who finds that maddeningly ironic? Maybe. This is your Green News Report.
Get ready for this season's hot new beverage, Coke Flat. None of the fizz, all of the brown.
Okay, Desi Doyen, from your teasers there, it sounds like you got nothing but bad news for us today. For a change.
Well, wait, there might be some good news at the end.
We'll see.
First up, California Governor Gavin Newsom officially expanded an emergency drought declaration in the state, directing regulators to take more aggressive steps to curtail water use after 2 of nearly the driest months in California history. Although a big storm is forecast for Northern California that will help contain ongoing massive fires, it will also increase the risk of flash floods and deadly mudslides in burn areas.
Yeah, nothing but bad news.
And of course, one storm is not enough to end the state's 22-year mega drought.
No, it ain't.
A slew of reports this week have issued dire warnings ahead of the United Nations Global Climate Summit in Glasgow starting on November 1st. First, the United Nations Environment Programme's annual production gap report this week found world governments have plans on the books to produce more than double the amount of fossil fuels in 2030 than is consistent with keeping global temperatures from rising more than 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels that would help us avoid catastrophic global warming.
In other words, countries around the world are planning to produce way too much fossil fuels, even though they know they must stop.
Exactly. The future production plans of 15 countries, including the United States, underscores the chasm between meaningful climate action and the rhetoric of policymakers and business leaders. The 1.5 degree aspirational target under the Paris Climate Agreement is considered particularly important because overshooting increases the risk of triggering global climate tipping points.
Oh, we're going to trigger those tipping points.
A new report in the medical journal The Lancet warns that global warming is now the world's greatest threat to human health, and failure to act on it endangers millions of lives. The report tracks 44 global health indicators tied to climate change, like deadly heat waves, infectious diseases, pollution, and hunger, and found that all are getting worse.
I guess we haven't got to that good news part yet.
We have not. In Washington...
Oh, I know we're not getting the good news now.
Democratic Senator Joe Manchin of the coal state of West Virginia has all but killed killed Democrats' landmark Clean Electricity Performance Program that would have incentivized utilities to accelerate the shift to renewable energy. But a new report from research firm Rhodium Group finds that the U.S. climate targets to cut emissions in half by 2030 is still within reach, even without the program. Difficult, but doable if the White House, federal agencies, states, and corporations act swiftly.
Oh, I'm sure they will.
The analysis also confirms that decarbonizing the electricity sector will lower consumers' energy bills. And they didn't even include the enormous public health benefits from reducing air pollution, which alone would easily pay for the transition.
But will it put money in Joe Manchin's pockets? That's the important thing here, I think.
But enacting meaningful climate policy at all levels of government requires sustained public pressure, according to UC Santa Barbara climate policy expert Dr. Leah Stokes on a recent broadcast.
People should keep the pressure up. And if those listening want to get involved, there's a website called call4climate.com. Call4climate.com, and it has a phone number, and it will just patch you directly through to your representatives and your senators, give you a script for what to ask for, and that's the way you can get involved in this moment. So despair is not an option.
If despair is not an option, why do I have so much despair?
Finally, some good news.
Yay!
The Biden administration this week began the process of establishing a 20-year moratorium on new copper mining in Minnesota's Superior National Forest. The move could derail a proposal by a Chilean mining corporation to develop a massive, controversial copper and nickel mine in the watershed of the beloved Boundary Waters National Canoe Area Wilderness.
Like I said, not much good news, but we'll take what we can get. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I think I love Florida. Evidently, the governor of Florida is reaching out to all of those policemen across the country who are the anti-vax crowds. Now, understand, according to CBS News, the leading cause of death among police officers in this country right now, COVID. That's the number one cause. Not suicides anymore, not death on the job, but COVID. Number one cause. So he's reaching out to the people in New York who are saying, I'm not getting vaccinated. Seattle, Minneapolis, other places, saying, hey, come on down to Florida. We'll give you $5,000 to help you move down here, so you can come down and help with public safety by being unsafe yourself. Brilliant. Exactly what you would expect. Exactly what you expect from Florida. Here to share some thoughts on is this a good idea? Oklahoma tried it with nurses. We'll see how this goes. I've asked our good friend Bob Ney, former Ohio congressman and political analyst, to come share some thoughts. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you, Rick.
So what do you make of this? What are your thoughts?
I mean, I know what he's saying, that they're lacking some police officers, so they're going to try to recruit, quote, any way that they can, but it's just irresponsible. I mean, especially the contact that police officers have, with people and, obviously right up close and personal. So, I was just surprised that they would do this. It'd be like being a nursing home in Florida and saying, if you don't want to be vaccinated in Ohio, come down here, you can work in our nursing home.
Yeah, but again,
direct contact jobs.
Yeah, but again, this is another one of these crazy Republican states. And Florida is now just, I guess, like a number of them. But Florida, I guess, a special place because there was a report of the Surgeon General of Florida being thrown out of a state senator's office because they refused to wear a mask. And you go, wait a second, the state senator, this Tina Polsky, is someone who is a breast cancer survivor, and if she gets COVID, could be a death sentence. I mean, just bizarre to me. The Surgeon General.
I was going to say, just on top of the story about the policeman, comes the story about Senator Tina Polsky you just mentioned. And what is just the most bizarre thing about this is that the Florida Surgeon General, Ladapo, he asked to meet with her. He asked for the meeting. And he, by the way, I don't know if you saw this, but he's preparing for his upcoming Senate confirmation hearing, all right? So he asked for the meeting, and his office informed him, again, just like you said, she had a serious condition, and he then offered to talk to her outside. That's what he said. Well, we'll talk outside. And she said, no, we should, chat in my office. And then they went back and forth, and then the senator asked the future Surgeon General if there was a reason he couldn't wear a mask. And he just smiled. And he didn't answer her. He just smiled. Now, when you throw these parts in that story, Rick, it's even worse than the headline.
Yeah.
He just smiled at her. What would it have hurt him? What would it have cost him to put on the mask? Well, I think what it would have cost him is his job with the governor.
Yeah, no, you're right there. That's how crazy this has gotten. And this is why, I talked a couple of weeks ago about this guy I met who, he has, has some pre-existing conditions, and he's afraid if he gets the vaccine that he's develop some problems. And I respect that. But he goes out and he says, look, I understand that I'm putting others at risk, and I try and be respectful of their conditions. So I wear the mask. I hate them. I socially distance. I stay away from crowds. I do everything I can do to make sure I don't get anyone sick, or I don't get sick, because it could be the end of me. But I look at guys like this with no respect whatsoever. And what is it about this moment in our history where we seem to have absolutely no respect for ourselves, let alone anyone else?
Well, she had a cancer diagnosis, and it's common human courtesy for him to respect her problem and just put a mask on for the meeting. It wouldn't have philosophically killed him. It wouldn't have been making a statement. He could still say whatever he wants about masks or vaccinations, because he's done that too, by the way. But no, he had to take it to the point where he just looked at her and he smiled.
Yeah. Or they could have just done a Zoom meeting. I mean,
yeah, sure. Well, he asked for the for the person-in-person meeting. Yeah. He asked for that meeting. She didn't ask him. He asked her.
So I'm guessing she's not going to vote for him?
I would assume that. I mean, if I were her, I would say it's a good possibility. The president of the state senate, Wilton Simpson, did denounce his behavior in a memo to the members of the Senate. Again, no matter who his boss is, quote, which the governor appoints, it wouldn't have been defying the system to have worn a mask, and especially in his position of what he does.
Yeah, the Surgeon General. I mean, if the Surgeon General is acting in that kind of a massive, irresponsible way, what do you think kind of policies is he going to push?
Right, exactly. Well, he was afraid of his job, but maybe, I don't know, maybe this might cost him the appointment. Who knows?
Yeah, we'll see. I hope it does. But then here's the other part. You might get somebody even worse.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Is what it is. Let's look at the Build Back Better plan. Over the weekend, you had Senator Manchin, Schumer, and President Biden meet at Biden's home in Delaware. What do you think went on?
Well, it was for multiple hours, and so it was probably the most that Schumer and Manchin actually sat that long with each other and talked in the last few months. But there's pieces out of this, and again, I just say pieces. Manchin has now supposedly went to 1.7 trillion from 1.5 trillion, and the White House is sort of saying, well, maybe 2 trillion. So again, he's went from 1.5 to 1.7. I don't know if Manchin will go to 2 trillion. There's another side to this, though, and that is what Manchin, and I'm looking more, Rick, at what wasn't said out of that article about what Manchin will philosophically accept as parts of this legislation beyond the money. For example, the child tax credits, the dental and the eye care for seniors and Medicare. Now, the one thing that did come out of there, though, is that Manchin said he would support the tax on the 1,000 billionaires and the 15% corporate tax, because I think Amazon, just recently in the last 2 years, paid some tax.
Yeah,
My
paid nothing.
memory serves me right.
Yeah.
So he did say that. So funding source-wise, at least he did say that. Because Senator Sinema rejected the earlier plan to reverse the Republican-led 2017 tax cuts, which would have then, raised some rates on the corporations more than, I think it's $5 million a year, and on some Americans that would earn what was $450,000 for couples. So at least Manchin came away, saying he would look towards the quote billionaire tax and the 15% corporate tax. But
yeah, I mean, you got to give the Democrats a way to pay for the spending that they're asking for, because that's
correct.
what Manchin said he wanted. But he's against the idea of raising taxes on the people who have all the money, which is kind of bizarre. So it's nice to hear that at least in this one little sliver, especially
correct.
those 745 billionaires who pocketed $2.1 trillion over the last 18 months, that maybe we're going to ask them to pay a little bit more.
Maybe, and I think it's something that the public will definitely, go along with. So I think resolving the revenue side is something that was, good out of this. The number, okay, 1.5, 1.7. Some are saying 2 trillion. I'm not sure they can push it to 2 trillion with him, but at least some things have come out of here. I would stress, though, this has a long way to go.
So you don't think it's going to happen by this week, because Biden had said he has hoped to move on this week. Since last week they missed the deadline. How do you see that possible?
I don't think so. I don't think so, because when they settle on the figure, which again is probably at 1.7 trillion, may move a little, but once they settle on the figure, then they have to take that figure and sort of quote divide it by the committees in the Senate. Because the Senate will continue to be the problem. The House will support something different, most likely, if they want to. The Senate's got to move on something, and then they go to the conference committee between the two chambers. And, that could still happen. But the reason I don't think it's going to happen this week is that the committees who were originally, let's just throw this out here for argument's sake, the committees originally were told, hey, here's $3.5 trillion. Health and Human Services, you're going to get $200 billion. Veterans, you're going to get $220 billion. And they started to craft law, which was due September 15th in a draft. That's way past, obviously. Now they've got to go back and say, okay, your figure is lower. But what does the committee do with that, Rick? Do they keep the 5 programs that they have under their jurisdiction and just cut them all in half for funding, or do they say, well, we're not going to do all 5, but we're going to do 2 of them full funding? I mean, I don't know.
No.
So that's why I don't think mechanically they can do this by the end of the week. I just don't think mechanically they can do it. And then put it into a draft and get it to the floor.
No, I mean, to me,
I just don't see it happening.
I'm looking at some of the things that they've already pulled out of it. The free community college, which I think is imperative.
Right.
Some of the child care credits that are there, that's a problem. The free kindergarten stuff, I think, or pre-kindergarten stuff is a problem. But the weird thing to me is the Medicare stuff. That's not politically. That's a winner. Telling Granny that we're going to get her some chompers and maybe some glasses and some hearing aids. I don't know how that's not a winner. I don't know how that's not something that's automatic.
Well, it is a winner, and if they eliminate all of it, it'll be tragic, because even with the seniors, what they could say is, all right, we're going to give you a voucher for, instead of the $1,000, we're going to give you, a voucher for $200, $300, $400. I mean, anything is going to help, especially with dental too.
Yeah.
With the soaring costs of dental, seniors aging, the teeth go bad, etc. So I would think that they would try to preserve something out of the lower figure they're getting versus scrapping it. But see, that's the choices that they're having to make because the figure's reducing. That's why I just don't think that all the arguments could be settled within a week's period of time. I think this is going to get, bandied back and forth. Now, once again, though, the Senate could follow the reductions. The House goes a different path. Then they have a conference committee. Then it's a take it or leave it vote when it comes back to the chambers. You get one up and down. You don't amend. You don't amend. So maybe that's a strategy, too. They add more into the conference committee, and they take it to the floor and kind of dare people to down the bill. I don't know yet.
And then we haven't really gotten into the other wild card in all this Kirsten Sinema, who I don't know if you've been following some of the wackiness going on around her. But, she's still off on this weird, not talking to anybody, fringe kind of hanging out with Tim Scott from South Carolina. I'm just weird, just bizarre.
Well, it is, and Senator Manchin has been the out front face of all of this. Not all, but most of the articles are about Senator Manchin. They'll mention Senator Sinema once in a while, but there was only an article in the last maybe 3 weeks that kind of started to detail what a lot of people didn't know, what you just said, though. A lot of people didn't know it, that she holds her cards so close to the vest, not even people around her know what she's thinking, has refused to talk even internally to her colleagues about where she's going to be. So once they get past Manchin, they still have Senator Sinema to deal with. And let's face it, if she wants to, really take the stage on this and be difficult, she then will be the focal point after Manchin's settled, and, might be some more compromises. Who knows?
Yeah.
For publicity.
And here's the thing, politically, the longer this plays out, the less help it's going to be come next election cycle. And ultimately, Democrats could lose both the House and the Senate, which is possible. And then all of these things that they've pushed forward for could end up being gutted down the road anyway.
Yes, that's true. And one of the problems that they have is that probably at some point in time this summer, this should have been moved upon with a lower number. But everybody tried to kind of move Manchin along. And again, there was still the Senator Sinema factor they weren't even thinking about. But they were trying to move Manchin along this entire time, since around May or June. And probably moving on this faster would have been better. If this lapses into next year, it's a major problem. And then here's the real problem. Beyond, Rick, the fact that good public policy is not going to be brought forth, the real problem is that if they don't get some of these principles that they want in here that are progressive principles, right, that I think a lot of Americans will like, if they don't get it into some form of action, into law, then the base gets chilled. And when the base gets chilled and they don't turn out to vote, you have a midterm nightmare for the Democratic side.
I've already had people tell me they're going to stay home. If they don't get this,
right there.
If I don't get what I need, I'm staying home.
If they get chilled, sometimes they'll do that, and if they do that, then it's going to be, again, a midterm nightmare.
Which I never understood. Okay, you didn't get what you wanted,
right.
So, fold your hands, stomp your feet, and scream? That's not the answer. Vote people in who will get what you need. Support other candidates in places that, get Manchin out if you can. Sadly, there's no way a Democrat's going to beat Manchin in a primary, and no way he wins it in the general. So you're stuck with this guy. So maybe get a couple more senators in other states that might help you.
I was just going to say, if you don't win, a certain battle, you want to win the war, and the idea should be, let's say the 3.5 trillion doesn't make it this time. Let's say the battle line still should be, we've got to work harder, get more seats, make it a better situation to get more of the ideas that we like for society. That should be the battle cry. But if they say, well, I'm mad, I'm just going to stay home and I'm not going to vote, then they're going to get something they're really not going to like.
Yeah, that's easy. Common sense to me.
Very easy. It's the way the system works.
Or the way it's supposed to. Bob, I appreciate the time as always. Great stuff. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Our good friend Bob Ney. No, look, I mean, that's what we should be working towards. We should be working towards that as a matter of course. Quick break, right back. Stick around.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1990. That was the day that 8 of the 10 unions at the New York Daily News went out on strike. The paper had had one of the highest daily circulations in the United States. The New York Daily News was owned by the Chicago-based Tribune Company. The strike began when management demanded major concessions from the delivery drivers, essentially forcing them out on strike. 7 more unions joined them on the picket line. In retaliation, management brought in scab labor. This caused the 9th union to join the walkout. The newspaper guild workers had planned to honor the picket lines, but not go on strike themselves. But according to an article in the Los Angeles Times, quote, said local guild president Barry Lipton, the editorial employees decided almost immediately at an afternoon meeting to go on strike rather than to work with any imported scabs and goons. Well-known journalist Juan Gonzalez was a strike leader for the local. By using replacement workers, Daily News management was able to keep the paper in production, but they found it much more difficult to get the paper distributed. Even where they could make delivery, many newsstands refused to sell the struck paper. The New York Times blamed this on intimidation from the delivery drivers. But they also acknowledged that some refused distribution either out of sympathy for strikers or an unwillingness to offend pro-union customers. To support the strike, the unions put on a concert headlined by Lou Reed, along with Pete Seeger, Q-Tip from A Tribe Called Quest, and other musicians. The strike lasted for 5 months, prompting the Tribune to sell the paper. Under new management, the strike was finally settled.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
There's an interesting story coming out of Oklahoma. Evidently, the Oklahoma State Supreme Court has temporarily blocked 3 more of the abortion restrictions that were supposed to take place on November 1st. This matters because the law would place new limits on medication-induced abortions and require doctors who perform abortions to attain board certification in obstetrics and gynecology. So what they're doing, and look, this has been the playbook for a while. They're putting high bars on who can do this stuff and high bars on how to get to a place where it can happen. Instead of doing the things that I think you should be doing. If you're against abortion, which I am on a philosophical level, I would like to see none. So you do that by education, making sure that you don't have as many unwanted pregnancies, and you do that by creating an environment where people want to bring children into the world. Good jobs with good benefits and a good future, a social safety net that says, hey, we're going to make sure kids don't go to bed hungry at night, that they get a good education, that they get opportunities. For me, that's the way to go, instead of the punitive measures that we see from conservatives. Now, I've said, look, abortions, I take the Clinton line. They should be safe, legal, and rare. But if we had a system in place that said, we're going to make sure that every child, that no child truly is left behind, that we make sure that they're fed, clothed, and educated, then there should be a different world. But we got an entire Republican Party voting against the social safety net package that would help these children that are alive today get education, get food, get the extra $250 a month to help support them. They're against that. It's crazy to me, just crazy. But it is the world that we do live in, and with the political party that we do have. But yeah, it is what it is. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.